of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Did you get that?
I got you. Thank you, Larry.
I wasn't sure.
Good evening and welcome. Please be advised that this open meeting is being broadcast live and recorded for playback on WRPS at www.youtube.com/WRPS Rockland. Please go to WRPSRockland.com for further information. First on the agenda, community announcements. Doug.
Thanks, Mike. No typical announcements tonight. I just really wanted to thank the community for all their cooperation during the snow emergency and keeping cars off the streets so that the highway department could do their job. So really just a thank you to the community for that. And we'll talk a little bit more about the highway department's efforts later in my report. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Next on the agenda, review and approval of minutes of January 18th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, Selectman Ryan,
Yes.
Selectman Needham. Tiffany, yes? You're on mute.
Sorry, yes.
Problem. Selectman Penny
Yes.
and Vice Chair Nyman
Yes.
and myself. Thank you. On to new business, Fire Station Building Committee reappointments. For Fire Chief Scott Duffy, Deputy Tom Heaney, Lieutenant Charlie Williams, Resident Christy Filippo, Resident Jean Blaney, Resident Jim Killinger, and Resident Sue Egan Tasker. I'll entertain a motion to approve all appointments unless anybody has any comments, questions, or concerns.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, Selectman Ryan,
Yes.
Selectman Needham,
Yes.
Selectman Penny,
Yes.
Selectman Nyman,
Yes.
and myself. Next on the agenda, vote to accept new voting equipment per Mass General Law, Chapter 54, Section 34. Town Clerk, Liza Landy. Liza, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm just, hopefully you have the signature page, which you'll all come in and sign in Susan's desk. I need to get that paperwork to the Secretary of State's office before the April election. And we'll be having training on the new equipment, which has been, we voted at the last town meeting to approve the purchase of the equipment. I just need you guys to vote.
Can we ask
Okay,
questions? Any questions we can ask? How are these? One of the biggest issues of the day is election fraud. These machines that we buy are going to guarantee the people of the town of Rockland that we're going to hold a fair and honest election. And I'm just saying that because it's both sides are using, election fraud as their main theme for running their campaigns, it seems these days. And because we're buying new equipment, we want to make sure the people of the town of Rockland that, our elections are upright and forward and, the whole business, you know what I mean? You ought to, as a matter of fact, we ought to have you on at a future date to explain the whole election process, including the pre-voting and all that sort of stuff at some point prior to the election, so that people will understand the whole process that we're going to go through.
Sure. I'll happily do that. And to answer your question, the machines are not in any way electronic. So there is no, they read it electronically, but they're not connected to one another. So there's no internet, no Wi-Fi. So there's no fraud.
No, that's what I'm just wanted you to point out to the people so that they, people have any ideas or any questions about the machines. They'll know that they're all pre-approved and, the whole business,
Correct. They're all independent from one another.
Very good. Thank you, Liza.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for Liza? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I've got a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, Selectman Ryan,
Yes.
Selectman Needham,
Yes.
Selectman Penny,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Nyman,
Yes.
and myself. We're all set, Liza.
Thanks, Liza.
Thanks, Liza. You do a great
Thank
job.
you, Liza. Thank you.
Liza, you're on mute. I don't know if you were trying to say something.
I was just saying, don't forget to come in and sign.
That's what I thought you were saying.
All
So
right.
I'm just gonna make a reminder. Everybody, make sure you get in and sign the please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liza.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Next on the agenda, new multifamily zoning requirements for mass MBTA communities per Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 3A. Doug.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me just switch this. Can you see the presentation okay? Yeah, okay, great. So I wanted to give a brief overview tonight on a new state law that's referred to as the MBTA community zoning. So it's a new section in the Zoning Act, Section 3A. And you can see that it was approved in Chapter 358 of the Acts of 2020. And it added this new section applicable to what's referred to as MBTA communities. And the intent of this state law is to encourage the 175 towns that fall into this category, and Rockland is one of those towns. It's designed to really encourage multifamily housing by right in the towns. Here's a map of all the MBTA communities, and you can see Rockland with a red star in the middle. And you'll see there's different types of MBTA communities. And since we don't have a T station or commuter rail station in our town, but they are adjacent to us, we're considered to be what's referred to as an MBTA adjacent community. So we fall within this requirement, but there are different standards for the adjacent communities. I won't go through and read this, and I apologize for all the text, but I know you all had a chance to read this ahead of time. This is part of the body of the text of this new section in the Zoning Act. And the highlights are the following 4 requirements. So we and the other communities are going to be required to have at least one zoning district of reasonable size. And I'll get into what reasonable size means later. But we have to have a zone where multifamily housing is permitted by right, and it has to meet all the following criteria. Minimum gross density of at least 15 units per acre, can't be more than 1/2 mile from a commuter rail station or subway station, no age restrictions, so it can't be restricted for senior housing, things like that, and it must be suitable for families with children. Those are the main 4 components of the requirements in the zoning. Now, to be clear, it's not a mandate to actually physically construct a certain number of housing units or meet a certain production target. There's no actual requirement that any of these units actually get built. The requirement for the town is just that we have this by right zoning district in effect, and that I think the state's assumption is that over time, some portion of that will ultimately get built out. So similarly, it's not intended to be dedicated for a specific development site or a specific project. It's really intended to be zoning, which would cover, a particular area, not spot zoning and not targeted toward a particular development. I mentioned the reasonable size requirement earlier. And the information that I've read indicates that it has to be at least 50 acres of land, and it also has to be within 1/2 mile from a transit station. Another point, the last bullet, I won't read through all the words, but it basically talks about how it has to be an appropriate type of geographic area. It can't be like some bizarre patchwork of non-contiguous parcels, and it has to include at least 25 contiguous acres of land. So these are some of the general requirements of the physical district. Now, why are we talking about this now? Well, there's 2 reasons. So the first is what I put in red here in bold characters. If in order to continue to be eligible for certain federal state grant programs like the Mass Works program, which is really important to Rockland, we have to be in compliance with this new law. So again, if we're not in compliance, if we don't adopt the particular zoning that's required and approved by a certain deadline, we'll be ineligible for Mass Works grants and other types of state assistance. So that's the big hammer that the state has. Now, there's a couple of steps involved in getting there because this is a pretty significant requirement. So the first step is to be in compliance for FY22, which is why I'm presenting this to you tonight. One of the steps is we have to have a presentation of these draft guidelines at a Board of Selectmen meeting, which is what I'm doing right now. And to be clear about what these draft guidelines are, there's the state law that's already been enacted and signed into law, but then the state is enacting guidelines and all the details about how it's interpreted and how it's implemented. So all these things that I'm mentioning tonight are part of these draft guidelines. So the first checklist to be in compliance is we need to discuss this on a publicly posted Board of Selectmen meeting. The next step is we need to complete and submit a form, and it's an online form to the state, which I can do after this meeting. And then if required, we may have to submit some geographic information systems data to the state. I'm not sure if this actually applies to us or not, but we will find out if it does. And if it does, we'll comply. And if it doesn't, then we won't have to worry about it. So some of the big next steps, and I'm certainly going to be happy to try to answer any questions if I can, but I'm obviously not an expert in this area. One of my big next steps is this is the exact type of issue that we're facing that really highlights the need for a town planner in Rockland. And I know I've been probably boring people because I've been mentioning it for a couple of years now, but this is really just a kind of a classic example because someone is going to need to take the lead on this project. And there's a lot of steps involved here. The first is, who knows? Maybe it's possible that we already have some zoning in place currently that already meets these requirements. I don't think we do, but somebody would have to do that analysis to see maybe there's some prior zoning we've done, that might comply. The next thing somebody would have to look at if that's not the case, which I suspect it's probably not, is well, where would it make the most sense to be a half a mile from a transit stop? Would it be, on the Abington line, right near the Abington commuter rail, or would it be something, I don't know, maybe up toward Union Point area or in a different part of town? I mean, there's a lot of technical issues, not to mention determining where that geographic area will be and all the details associated with the zoning, community outreach. We have an excellent planning board. They're all volunteers. They all have other full-time day jobs, and we're going to need someone to take the lead on this. So if we had a planner, that would be his or her job to take the lead on this. Absent that, we will most likely need to get some technical assistance either from the state or from MAPC to help us develop some draft zoning, which can then be presented to the planning board and be fully developed from there. In the meantime, we'll obviously work with our land use council and the planning board to try to work toward those next steps to be in compliance. So I talked earlier about how we're an adjacent community and there's different requirements depending on the different type of MBTA community that you are. So for adjacent communities, we have to obtain state approval of a timeline and an action plan by July 1 of 2023. And then we have to have an approved action plan and zoning adoption by December 31st, 2024. So those are really the key dates that we're looking at. And with that, I know that's a lot of information, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you might have. Again, this was intended tonight really just to be high-level overview, to check off that box on our FY22 compliance so we can fill out the form, stay in compliance while we work toward this. And of course, the town always has the option of saying no, we're going to choose not to adopt this zoning, but then we'll have to face those repercussions of not being eligible for different types of state grants. So with that, Jen and I will be happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Doug. I'll open up to the board. Anybody have any questions or comments, concerns?
I mean, the comment I have, obviously, I saw that announcement. I've read through it a little bit. Certainly we look, the first thing we got to do is identify those transit stops, so obviously the train station in Abington, but then we're going to have to look at what bus stops are in Weymouth and fall within that half mile, because the only other one is Hingham, and I don't believe any of Hingham's stops are anywhere near within a half a mile of us. So we're going to be limited right out the gate on where this could happen to begin with. And then when you start looking at 50 acres and where we're limited, I really think when it's all said and done, it's going to be a really small scope on where this might even be able to be zoned. Never mind if it ever happens, you know? And I guess at the end of the day, you know, another great, you know, real deep thought by our lawmakers, you know, but you know, for a community like ourselves, you know, being adjacent and being as densely developed as we are in limited space and scope, you know, Doug, you mentioned Union Point, but you know, when you look at it, that's probably, along with you know, the Center Ave area, is probably the only areas that are within that half-mile, you know, radius. But would we even be able to change that zoning and do that as part of this?
Yep.
Because Union Point's, it's a whole different entity and animal, you know? So there's a lot of questions on what we can do and how Union Point can or cannot play into this, you know?
Okay, could you address that a little bit if you want, if you like. Rich, I think you're right. I think the two options that we have to look at in terms of location are the Abington Commuter Rail Station and Union Point. But because we're an adjacent community, and if we're not within that half-mile radius, we could look to areas like Union Street in a downtown central location, or anywhere where there's a BAT bus stop. And we're actually looking in right now into the overlay district on Union Street to see if it meets the zoning requirements of the new Section 3A requirements.
Oh, so our BAT bus stop would fall within this guideline?
Yes, because we're in an adjacent community, and if those two other stations are not within a half-mile of our border, or we could make a case as to why those are not really 50 acres that
Viable.
can be developed.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yes, Union Street could be a possibility. And to
Okay.
answer your zoning question, it could be an overlay district.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, so with the creation of this zoning, is this something that we envision in the future, the state potentially forcing projects on us because it falls within the zoning that we've created? If it's a project that may not be favorable for the town, but do we see it as something that's them saying, well, you guys voted to select this as your area to put this if it comes up, so this is the zoning, so this is where it's going to go?
I mean, again, my sense of it is, and Jen, you tell me if you have a different take on it, the state documents that I've reviewed make it clear that it's not intended to target any particular project, and they're not requiring any actual production. So there's, all that they're doing is they're kind of forcing, using the lever of state grants. They're, kind of using that as the hammer or the stick to get us to approve this zoning. But the key thing is that it's by right. So once that zoning's in place, anybody that meets those criteria, it's allowed by right therein. They don't need a special permit. They don't go before the zoning board or anything. So I don't think it would be the state ever pushing a particular project, but it's more that if we want to continue to have access to these grant programs, we're either going to have to approve our current compliance or adopt a new zoning overlay that'll be in compliance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably part of a broader discussion. Just, it's very similar to kind of what we just went through with the opioid settlement and what we see with 40B, where we have localized boards in place to make decisions to best govern the town, and then the state says, well, if you want money from us, then you're going to fall under these guidelines, and then have no say in whatever comes in after the fact. So I think at some point, before we make any kind of decision, what's the date that we need to make a decision as far as adopting this?
So I don't know about a decision to adopt it, we have to have, I'm just going to go back to the screen. We have to have a timeline and action plan by July 1 of 2023. That's sort of our first deadline.
So I think at some point, I know we're doing this meeting tonight. I think a public information session might be appropriate, just to inform the public and let them know exactly what every piece of this program that the Commonwealth's asking us to implement, just so that they can have their questions and answers asked to the appropriate people, as opposed to having, you know, the Facebook attorneys and land use councils explain the rules to them. But I think it's one of those things, again, where it's you know, we as a community are not solvent and aren't able to, you know, do things on our own necessarily without the funding of the state. So if we want that funding, unfortunately, you know, we have to follow whatever guidelines. I mean, what are the benefits for the town of Rockland outside of being able to apply for specific grants?
I guess I would say it this way, I suppose. I mean, if there's zoning that we want to do, we would just do the zoning that we want, right? So,
Mhm.
you know, they're really kind of pushing us in this path because the state's policy objectives is to create more housing, and they want more smart housing, near transit, yada, yada, yada. So, you know, all that's in it, and I guess in the end, is for us to be able to still have access to state grant programs. That's really it, because we could always do the zoning on our own whenever we want. I don't know, Jen, do you have a different take on it than that?
No, I mean, I think that's right. The reason that this is being put forth is zoning changes and to encourage the creation of housing and transit-oriented development. But the grant programs that are being targeted are the larger programs, MassWorks, for example. And I think that's one that Rockland certainly wouldn't want to shut itself out of. But I think we take the time, you know, there's a significant comment period right now as it relates to the guidelines. I think we take the time and we look to see where, you know, we might have to, or where the best location is to adopt this zoning district or the overlay. And we take it from there.
I mean, Jen, I definitely, what you said about, you know, the BAT bus, I think that was, in my mind, was somewhat of a game changer, because I was thinking about what Rich was saying. We have no real control over Union Point, and although, you know, we could, you know, create that area up there and say that this is going to be the area because we're within half a mile, we have no place else. I mean, we're not within. There's no place in Rockland that's not developed already that's within a half a mile of the Abington T station. So, you know, if that BAT bus, if we get credit for that BAT stop, then great. And we can throw another overlay district on top of the overlay district, on top of whatever overlay district comes up again, you know, and eventually at some point, you know, we get a developer that, you know, how is this playing out in the development community though? I mean, are we seeing in other towns this, Is this been implemented in other states? Is this something that's unique to Massachusetts, or have we seen that this is something that the development community is going to look to take advantage of it in a similar fashion that they take advantage of 40B?
Yeah, I don't know if it's unique to Massachusetts, but what I can tell you is that it's anticipated, and I agree that there's going to be a lot of discussion between now and the end of the comment period. DHCD's guidelines are, they're kind of loose. And there's a lot of interpretation. And so now's the time for community to really sit and think about how it impacts, particularly an adjacent community, and provide some comment back to the agency.
I mean, there are going to be several communities that I think are going to really struggle with how does that, you know? I mean, you know, again, they paint this with a broad brush, but they're doing this in communities that are already, a lot of them are, you know, pretty well built out, you know, within 20, 25 miles of Boston. You know, again, I just think a poorly thought out plan by the state to try to force, I think, affordable housing. You know, it's just I think it's just gonna be a challenge, you know, as we do this. But, you know, to your point, you know, an overlay district, maybe the go. And Mike, to your point, you know, an overlay on an overlay on an overlay, we meet the I guess the spirit of the,
Mm.
of it. But, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, when they start talking about 25 contiguous acres in a 50-acre block, we don't have a lot of options. So at the end of the day, I guess as we look through this, I think one of the things, and we're definitely going to need some help, if we can be strategic through this, and to your point, Mike, an overlay over an overlay over an overlay may meet the guidelines, but in reality, is a developer really going to be able to do anything and want to do anything?
Mm.
Can I
And
actually have a
Rich-
question?
Oh, Sorry.
I heard Jen.
just real quick, I'm not sure that you'd have to adopt an overlay over an overlay if the district already meets the requirements or the criteria.
Okay. Doug.
I just want to do two quick things. I just want to make the point that it does not have to be undeveloped land. So just to be clear, it can be an overlay over a whole existing area that's already has development, but it's an overlay on top. So there could be redevelopment that would meet the criteria. I just want to make that point. And then secondly, Mike, I'm always willing to meet with you and anybody from the public on any topic at any time, but we might want to think about waiting a little bit on this one to get a little bit more feedback from the state on exactly what the details on the guidelines are going to be, and also to pull in some technical assistance to help us. So that would be but I'm happy to always do it whenever.
Tiffany, I'll go to you 1 second. Yeah, Doug, I totally, I know we're way far ahead on this one. I know, after you gave us the date of, 2023, obviously we have a lot of time, and maybe we get somebody in place that can spearhead the project itself. But I think it's one of those things that we've heard loud and clear from the residents as of late, that they want as much information as possible. And I think this is the perfect forum where you guys have presented the information that you guys have to this point. And I just see this as something that, hey, let's check the calendar, put a mark on this one, that this is something that we're going to continue to discuss down the line. And at some point, we're going to probably need some kind of a public information session, because I think there's going to be a lot of, confusion, maybe misinterpretation, and honestly, maybe a little bit of anger. I mean, I'm not entirely against it, but I do find myself growing more increasingly frustrated with these projects of the state, or these limits that the state puts on us as a town, and really takes the decision making out of our hands on a lot of these projects, and then leaves us here to answer. To the residents as to why we can't do anything about it, when it's the state that made the law and has taken the power away from our local boards that our residents elect. So with that, Tiffany, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you for the overview, Doug. My question was more along the lines of, in lieu of our not having a planner at present, could you elaborate a little bit more on the actual state assistant the assistance from the state that we would seek? Would it be basically in ascertaining where this district would be, or I just wanted to hear a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question. We'll have to see, what's being offered, as part of this program. But I imagine, and hopefully it could be something similar to what MAPC, our regional planning entity, offers, which is, an entity that has a staff with land use planners that can, really start by evaluating our current zoning bylaw, look at our current zoning map, understand what we actually have in place now, then start looking at, the guidelines, look at the transit maps, really kind of come up with a whole action plan. They talk about the need for an action plan. So that would really be a planner to help us, with that essentially that whole process. And these are the kinds of things, sort of the bread and butter of what land use planners do. It's the type of thing that there's case studies on when they're in, school for this type of stuff. So it would really be for the whole process, beginning with, I hate using the word planning so many times, but the administrative planning work, and then ultimately, hopefully, getting to the point where, presenting to the Board of Selectmen, maybe there's some community outreach meetings that we get some kind of general consensus, like, okay, here's something we might want to pursue. Then they're going to help draft some zoning, then ultimately present it to the planning board. They'd have their public hearings and really work us all the way through town meeting. So it's a pretty involved process, and that's why the need for a planner is so great.
Thank you.
You sure can, Larry.
And how much would a planner cost the town of Rockland per year?
So it all depends, Larry, and if we're talking, full-time and part-time, a good planner in a town that can afford it might spend, $100,000. In a community like Rockland, given all of our other needs, I think we would spend something less than that. Maybe we'd start at a part-time planner. Maybe it could be something shared with another town. It's a very, very specialized profession. So it's something I am trying to build into the budget. So in 2 weeks, when I present a balanced budget to you, hopefully I'll have that built in, and I'll give you an exact number for what I'm, trying to get there. But again, literally you see them in some communities. It's a much smaller dollar amount because it's part-time, only a very small amount of time. And in other communities, you'll see, a planner making $100,000, and you see everything in between.
Reason I ask is I've been really in favor of having a planner for the town of Rockland for quite a while. But, change is always something that takes time to bring to the people. But it's time that we sort of made the next leap into, I won't call it the real world, but the world of the state government. I agree with Mike that the state decides what's best for us, and it's sort of like your parents trying to tell you what to do when you're 25 years old. It's about the same attitude you get back to it, but it seems like this is going to be a long process to begin with. So like all state projects, take one step at a time, because by next year, they could be a new and improved plan. If somebody comes up with somebody replaces somebody on the committee and wants to make their mark. So I think one of the things we ought to address our state senator and our state rep and ask them to come in and explain to the citizens of the town of Rockland what the state does. When the state makes these decisions, we ought to bring them in and let them sit in front of us, and then we could throw the questions at them, and the people, and they can answer to the people of the town, because it's their responsibility to do that. And it's not our responsibility to tell the people of Rockland that the state wants to put things where they don't belong, if you want to be nice about it.
Yeah, I mean, at least get them to explain the thought process behind it. And we understand, I think we're all well aware that they've projected a affordable housing shortage in southeastern Massachusetts for the next 50 years, and they're trying to do what they can to close that gap and create more housing. But I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm getting tired of it. It just seems every single time that we try to do the right thing, then all of a sudden there's new rules that are being put on us, that you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. And then we have no say. And we're left to answer the people that we represent, and we really don't have any answers for them because we're not the ones that are in the position to make that decision. So it's either join the fight with them or get the answers. But so I think, Larry, you're right. When something like this comes up, maybe we should reach out to, Representative DeCoste and Senator Keenan and have them answer for the decisions that are made at the legislature.
Right, and who made this decision? I mean, is it a state law? Did the state legislature, state senate, the governor all sign off on this, or is this made by some ad hoc or some gifted committee who decides what's right for us? No, I'm serious about that. I mean, it's
Larry, you know what?
Are elected officials making this decision, or is some committee appointed by whomever?
Larry, that's actually a good question, because this is tied into the MBTA.
Yep.
Which is a quasi
dysfunctional
entity. So it'd be actually interesting to see if this went through the House and the Senate, or if this is an MBTA-driven initiative through the governor's office. It'd actually be interesting to know that.
Well, I think that we could bring our two reps in the state senator, and we'll put them on the hot seat, and we'll ask them all the pertinent questions, and we'll explain to them. Be prepared when you come here to answer these questions, because these are the hard questions that the people of the town of Rockland are going to want to ask about, as to why you all of a sudden you're deciding we're going to put 50 acres in your town where we're going to put affordable housing, whether you like it or not. And we don't care if it's a residential section, a business section, you just gotta make one. And, you know, and that's offensive to me, and I'm sure everybody else on the board. But again, you know, when you're messing with the state, you gotta walk around the edges, because if you don't, then as soon as they walk by an edge and you're in front of them, they're gonna kick you over the side, because that's the way they do business. And I've been in business with the state for a long time, and I actually rewrote couple of state, I called them on it when they cut us Chapter 70 money. I called both of them on the carpet, and I asked them what the heck they were doing for us. It was Bobby Nyman and Morrissey. And I said, what are you doing for us? And they were angry with me with the way I spoke with them. I said, I'm sorry, we're friends, but this is for the town of Rockland. This is where you represent us. We don't represent you, you represent us. And if there's questions that the people of the town of Rockland want to answer from the state level, then I think we ought to make them responsible instead of us trying to sit here and make heads or tails of it. I mean, Doug, he gets the message, and this is what you got to do. He's doing it tonight, step one. So we got step one out of the way. Now we have a year to work on step two. So let's, the people that I'm not going to be here, unfortunately, but the people that are going to be left are going to have to, do some work on this and try to get the explanation so that it doesn't come down the line someday and come back and bite us, and people say, oh yeah, you're not doing your job. We got to make the right people responsible for doing the right job. Sorry to rant and rave.
No, well said, Larry. Doug?
No, it ticks me off. It ticks me off to no end that they continually do this to you. And I've had my years of pushback with it. And prior administrations and stuff like that. And all it got us was, the Rockland write-off, nobody talks to you from Rockland anymore. And unfortunately, we're dependent on state aid. And we're dependent on a lot of state aid to fund our schools and everything else. And so they have that carrot in front of you, and they'll dangle it and just jerk it out of reach every time when they want to. And this is just, again, I would rather see us get the state rep and have them, who voted for this? When did they vote on it? How is it processed? So the people of the town of Rockland can understand the workings of the state and how we feel that we're getting it's a sort of a form of taxation without representation. Because they're saying that you got to do this, and if you don't do this, we're going to punish you for it. And that, to me, is fighting words if you really want to get down to it. But again, it's like me going to fight an octopus. You know what I mean? He's going to be hitting me from left and right, and from places I can't even see. And that's how they operate. Now, I hate to give you that pessimistic attitude, but I've been kicked too many times to not to look for the shod foot.
Well, I'll tell you, Larry, I love it. Doug, I'll go to you in 1 second. Larry, I love that even at this, I don't want to say ripe old age, but I'll say ripe old age, and 2 months from your final meeting, you still got this fire, and I'll have to sit down and talk to you, because coming up, I'll probably be the old guy on the board, and I got to pick up some of your traits on this one. So, Doug,
I'll be here. I'm not moving out of the States or anything, and I'm just a phone call away if anytime anybody wants to talk any kind of business like that, or ask for advice or counsel or or just ways to do things.
Yeah, Doug, he's going to apply for the town planner position.
I just can't get the image.
That's why he was asking the salary. He was like, what's the salary? I'll apply.
Well, I get to probably do it part-time.
I'm just trying to get the image of getting kicked by an octopus. I just keep thinking about that. I just wanted to highlight that.
My grandfather once told me that he went down to the gym to become a boxer. And the first time he was in the ring, he said, I got in there and that guy had more arms than an octopus. He said, and he was just wailing him from every direction. He said he knew he wasn't a fighter after that. So that one came from a long time ago.
There you go. That's good. No, I just wanted to clarify that because a few of you have used the term affordable housing with this. And so I didn't want there to be any confusion that the 4 criteria in the law get to density, 15 units per acre, proximity to a transit station, a half a mile from a commuter rail station, no age restrictions, and that it must be suitable for families with children. So that's I just wanted to be clear that it's, I think people might conflate this with 40Bs and things like that, and that's not what this is. So, but again, I didn't mean to get everybody all worked up tonight. I just, as Larry said, I just wanted to check off the first box so we can stay in compliance, so I can submit the form, and we'll have a lot of time to take it to the next step.
And Doug, I don't think it was you. I don't think it was it just being on the agenda. I think it's just it's a culmination of a lot of frustration, that we've been feeling as a board, and I know elected officials in some of the other towns that are feeling the same frustration for the fact that again, we're asked to answer for things that we have no control over, and we try to fight it out with the proper places, and we're told to just sit back and take the money they give us and shut our mouths, and it really goes against everything that pushed us, each one of us here, I think, to run for, and we all ran for this position to govern and affect change, and really, our hands are tied on a lot of these things because we're just going to do what the state tells us to do, because otherwise, the state doesn't give us any money, and the town suffers as a whole. So it's sacrificing our pride and in order to help the greater good, and you just sit back and you wait for them to find a way to take advantage of the rules that they made you pass. So, and with that, unless somebody else has something else, we can move on the agenda. Anybody else, anything else? Okay, that was my rant. Next on the agenda, town accountant transition. Doug.
Thanks, Mike. So I am sad to report out to the community that the town accountant, Elizabeth Zaleski Biz, who's on the Zoom tonight, has resigned her position from Rockland, and she's accepted a position in another town. So we are sad to see her go, and we certainly did not want her to leave. Her last day is going to be Friday, February 11th, which is a little less than 2 weeks from today. We are very fortunate to have really capable staff in our accounting department. Both Serena and Megan are really top notch, as the board knows, and they're always ready to step up. And I really just want to thank them in advance for their help, because I know they're going to be helping out quite a bit. But just to be honest, I am nervous about the transition because, neither of them nor I are a town accountant. And while I feel like I have a pretty good handle on municipal finance, that's not the same as being a certified municipal accountant. So I am a little nervous about the upcoming months. Biz has offered to help us, after hours on her own time with the transition after she leaves. But that's obviously going to be, pretty tough because she's going to be very busy with her new job. So I just want to set realistic expectations about how much time she'll really be able to give to us. But I do appreciate her offering that. We have made arrangements to bring in a consultant that's going to help us part-time during the transition. So that will definitely help. I do have some specific requests for the process to hire a new accountant, but maybe before I get into that, I should ask Biz if she has any comments she'd like to make just in general before we get into some of the procedural stuff. So I don't know, Biz, if there's anything you want to add or say, or no pressure if you don't.
No, I am very thankful for the staff that I've had in my office. They will do a great job in the transition, as they've always done a great job. And I have the utmost level of confidence in them to help bring Rockland forward. Not only that, as they know where I am if they need me.
All right, thanks, Biz.
Anybody, before you jump on to that, anybody have any comments or anything, any questions for Biz?
I don't have any questions for Biz. I just want to thank Biz for her years of service to the town of Rockland. You'll be deeply missed, and I wish you well in your new endeavor.
Thank you, Kara. Anybody else?
Yes, I'd like to thank Biz also for her time and efforts. The office ran very well, and her staff is very well trained, and both of them are actually looking to be business one day, I believe. So we're sad to see you go, but we wish you well.
Tiffany, you're on mute.
That's me tonight. Biz, I want to join and just say thank you, and for years of hard work. Thank you very much, and wish you the best.
Thank you all.
Rich?
Same thing, and Biz, wish you all the best. As I said earlier, I wish it didn't come to this. The town definitely is in a better position as you leave than when you entered. And I think that's the greatest compliment that you can give someone. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing what you've done for us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Rich.
much.
And you know, Biz, I'll just say it to you know, thank you, like everybody else said, but you know, I really just want to highlight, you know, what's impressed me the most about you. I've never known anybody that has the technical expertise that you have in your field. I mean, there have been things that have been brought up, and you instantly have the knowledge that exactly where that can come from, or how that money can be used, and that I think has been something that's been really something that we've appreciated having, you know. And you know, I think as a town, we'll always be in debt for you coming on board and you know, righting the ship for us. You know, I mean, you came into a tough situation. You came into a budget that I did, and God knows there was a lot of cleanup work on your part. And we'll always appreciate the job that you did, and we wish you nothing but the best in Holbrook, and hope that you're not a stranger. So,
Thank you. And to all the department heads and the entire staff for the town, it takes, you know, I hate the terminology, takes a village, but it does take a village, and it does take a team to succeed. And every single asset, which are your employees in the town, are valuable, and I thank them all.
thank you, Biz. Doug?
Thank you. So just getting to next steps, what I would, I've been thinking about this quite a bit and consulting with some others, and what I'd like to request to the board, if you're all amenable to this, is to request that you vote tonight to delegate the first phase of the hiring process to me. And what I would do is I would work with the HR director and the assistant town administrator. We would review the current job description, update anything if needed, put out all the advertisements in all the right places, and then pull in other staff and some other town officials as a team to help us review the resumes that we receive and all the cover letters, and then do just the preliminary interviews to narrow it down to just 2 or 3 finalists, which we would then turn over to the board for you to interview at upcoming public meetings. And a schedule that it's aggressive, but what I would like to try to achieve would be ultimately to have a person chosen by early April. That would be my goal. So rather than hire a consultant, I'd like to have a shot at trying to at least do the first phase of it in-house, and then, you know, have the finalists go before the board.
I have a comment on that.
Yep.
So what's more important than meeting a timeline is finding the right person. So last time that we went through this as a town, it was before you came on. I think there was a rush to fill the position, and it ended up not going well at the end of the day. We then actually went outside, looked for some assistance, and found a couple of qualified candidates, and Biz was one of them. Not saying that we can't do it on our own. We just need to make sure that we're capable of casting a wide enough net to find all of the potential candidates out there, and then go through a real vetting process. You know, one of the things that we did the last time was look outside our actual employees and found a couple of individuals in town that have an HR and hiring background, and part of that vetting process. And again, nothing against department heads or anyone on this board or anything else. There's a knack of interviewing and hiring people. We just want to make sure that we do this as best we can and find the best candidate. And at the end of the day, not set a specific date and rush. Because the first run through, if we don't find, what we don't want to do is settle, I guess, at the end of the day. And, I've been in business long enough. We just had a meeting today on that as we're going through some transition. And I said, the biggest thing we can't do is settle, because if you settle a year, 2 years from now, you're no better off than, if you waited it out and found the right candidate. So also as part of the transition, make sure if we need to hire a temporary to come in, and we've done that in the past to help work with the staff. I just want to make sure that we do it right. That's my only concern, I guess.
And I certainly agree with everything you said, Rich. And if I was putting out that date because that's ideally when we'd be able to get somebody chosen. Presumably they wouldn't start until, a month or two after that. That's what's, normal. But I agree with you. I would not want to rush just to get somebody to meet an artificial deadline and to compromise. And if I don't feel like we're able to do that, I won't hesitate to look for other assistance or potentially, a consultant to help with the process. But I'm throwing this out there because I feel like, it's a responsible first step, but I hear everything you said.
You just lose somebody? No. Okay. No, my whole screen just jumped around. So, okay. Anybody else have any comments on this? Any thoughts?
Let the process begin. That's all.
Tiffany, any comments, questions?
Yeah, no, I think where Doug has mentioned that he's given this some great thought, and he already has, a plan that he'd be able to move forward with. I would recommend just that, and that if it looked like as you basically down the road, if you needed additional help, Doug, you're well aware of the resources you could pursue, but my recommendation would be to go with the plan that you that you just presented to us. And then at the same time, absolutely agreeing with both Rich and Doug, none of us want to rush, but at the same time, the time to begin is now, because we have big shoes to fill, and we have a lot that we have to move forward with. And it's the season that you're definitely going to need that help. So I'm all for what Doug had recommended.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Doug, you and I discussed this briefly earlier, and I don't think there's any hesitation in your mind that if you're in the process, if you start the process and you realize that we're not getting the traction, that we won't go to a hiring center like we did the last time. And I think it's just a matter of, today's February 1st. Our next meeting is, February 15th. And what's your thought process on when you feel as though you'll have a decent sized applicant pool, assuming that you were to put some kind of an advertisement out in the next week or so?
Yeah, so I'm just looking to my left because that's where my calendar is. So, if we're able to get an ad out by say Friday the 11th, if we're able to put that out, then give a couple of weeks to get responses, that gets us to the, end of February. So really by like the very beginning of March, I would hope we could do like a preliminary screen and just have a general sense of where we're at. Because it's such a very technical, specialized field. So I think, at a quick glance, we can kind of tell, oh, good, we have a good pool of people with municipal accounting experience that we think, or like, oh my gosh, there's nobody with any relevant experience here. Like we're really, I think I kind of know, toward the beginning of March where we're at, but I see Biz has her hand up, so she may have something to add on that.
To help facilitate this process, I did put out an email to my local association, which is Plymouth, Norfolk, Bristol, and Cape and Islands communities. on the Accountants Association email and let them know that there would be an opening in Rockland and to watch for the MMA postings. So out of that field of people, hopefully you'll get good responses in a reasonable amount of time. So I did put it out there to try and assist with that.
So I think, thank you, Biz. I think one of the things that we just got to make sure, and Doug, I know you guys will do this, is whatever we set as the qualifications, that we don't lower our standard from what the qualifications are set in the application or in the job description. To Rich's point, we don't want to settle. So if this is what we're asking, then this is what we're hoping to get, and less than that isn't necessarily qualified. And if we find that, in the initial run, we're not able to attract, a decent pool of candidates, or even, I prefer to have more than, 2 people that meet those specifications. So, if we find that we have those 2 people and maybe we reach out to, a firm to help us after that and see if they can get some more people and see if the 2 people that we might maybe find, stack up well against that as well. But, I don't have a problem with you guys starting off the process, but I just think we just have to make sure that we are on top of that kind of timeline before we let it go for too long and realize that there's nothing coming in, just got to know when to start the next process if needed. So.
And if you're comfortable kind of having me start the process, I'm happy to check in with you and just to give you a general sense of, things are looking good, or, I can check. So we don't have to wait until the last minute. I can check in along the way with you.
Yeah, definitely. And you've always been good about communicating with us. And I think, maybe just make it part of your town administrator comments for the next couple of meetings. And if there's something that comes up in the course of the week, shoot off an email to the rest of the board and go from there. So with that, I would entertain a motion to allow Doug and team to start the initial process for the town accountant transition hiring process.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion in 2 seconds. Selectman Ryan,
Yes.
Selectman Needham,
Yes.
Selectman Penny,
Yes.
and Vice Chairman Nyman,
Yes.
and myself. It's unanimous. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next on the agenda, other new business not reasonably anticipated.
I have none.
Okay, old business. Sewer Department interim superintendent update and commissioner update. We're bypassing this tonight. Acting Superintendent Dave Taylor obviously has been dealing with plowing snow for the last 3 days, so he's pretty exhausted. So we figured we push this back to the February 15th meeting. So look forward to that. Next on the agenda, American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. General ARPA update, designate new Plymouth County ARPA authorized submitter/preparer. Doug.
Thanks, Mike. I'd like to share my screen again and do one other PowerPoint presentation tonight. Let me just get the settings. Great. Hopefully you can see that okay. The purpose of this presentation tonight, Mike, is we've had a couple of general discussions, and I thought it'd be important to update the board and the public on where the town sits with the American Rescue Plan Act, which is known as ARPA. So ARPA was enacted into federal law in March of 2021. And as you can see in the slide, it's providing $360 billion in funding to states and local governments across the country to deal with the impact of COVID-19. There's 4 general categories of allowable uses of the funds per the federal law, and these 4 things come straight from the legislation. The first is responding to the public health emergency and its negative economic impacts. The second is premium pay to certain employees that provided essential work during COVID. The third is providing government services to the extent that COVID negatively affected revenue or reduced revenue to communities. And this is what's known and commonly as revenue replacement. And then the fourth is investing in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So the timeline and the dollars for Rockland are as follows. The first thing with timeline, this is affects all communities throughout the whole country. We have time. So expenses have to be obligated by the end of the calendar year 2024. And we actually have until the end of calendar year 2026 to actually spend the money. So we do have time. There's two different paths of funding. There's funding that the town gets directly from the federal government, which is referred to as non-entitlement funding. So for Rockland, that totals $1.88 million. And we get it in two phases. The first phase, we received half of that funding last spring in June of 2021. We received half of that amount, which is $941,000. We'll receive that second half of that funding next June of 2022, for the remaining $941,000. So that'll come directly to the town. And I'll speak in a minute about potential uses of that. The remainder of our funding is $3.338 million, and that's going to Plymouth County. And then we're going to have to request access to that funding to the county. It's going to flow through the county, not directly to us. So going back to that first phase of funding that we received, and I put in this slide a couple times the word tranche, because that's the word that the federal government and the state government is using. So the different segments or phases of funding are referred to as tranches. So our first tranche we received last spring totaled $941,000. What the town elected to do was use 100% of that for our revenue replacement. And if we go back in time, you know, our budget was really just reeling from the impact of COVID. All the restaurants were shut down, hotels and motels were shut down, our local receipts were plummeting, you know, McKinley was shut down, school wasn't able to provide all kinds of, you know, daycare and other, you know, lunch programs. So I shouldn't say Biz, our town accountant, used a very complicated formula that the federal government required to be used that compared funding from what was projected at a certain time versus what we actually received, and then she calculated the difference. And the way it shook out was our general fund was able to claim $364,000. The various town revolving funds could claim a little under $84,000. And then the remainder, over $493,000, was allocated toward all the school revolving funds. So I should highlight that the actual losses for all of those categories greatly exceeded this amount. So Biz did the calculation, and then we looked at it proportionally and then just allocated the straight pro rata share to each of these categories. And you can see it depicted on the right-hand side in the pie chart, how the funding was allocated for that first direct payment. So the $364,000 on the general fund side is not able to be spent yet. Once our next year's free cash gets certified about a year from now, then that will ultimately be able to be spent by the town. And again, with the revolving funds, you can see, just because the school is so much larger than our programs, over 85% of the revolving fund revenue replacement went to the schools, and a little under 15% went to the towns. So related to this first tranche of funding, there's just a kind of a technical administrative action that's going to happen soon, where the town's going to have to file a report with the federal treasury soon, indicating exactly how we use that funding. Now, the second tranche, the second half, that additional $941,000, again, is going to come in next June. You know, we can talk as we get closer to that date about exactly what we could do with that funding. My recommendation likely could be to, again, look at revenue replacement, possibly even using the same numbers again that we did before, to keep the various programs afloat and to enable the general fund to use these funds for allowable purposes. So now going to the county funding, that $3 million plus funding that's going to be available to us. If you look back to the earlier slide I had that showed the four categories of allowable spending per the federal law, that's what Plymouth County is administering. But in order for anybody, any community, to access funding from Plymouth County, it's going to be an electronic application that you file online through a special county website that they created just for ARPA. It's a portal. And they broke out those 4 general categories in the federal law into kind of 6 more refined categories, which you can, and this is the left side is an actual screenshot right from the Plymouth County ARPA portal site. So you can see they split it up a little bit more detailed. Water and sewer is 1 category, broadband's another, revenue loss is a 3rd, premium pay is a 4th, negative economic impacts is a 5th, and then supporting the public health response is 6th. So again, any use that we ever are going to have for claiming ARPA funds through the county is going to have to start by picking one of these boxes and then drilling down into all the level of detail that they're going to require from there. So previously, the board designated me as the Plymouth County ARPA authorized representative and as the recipient. And the board also authorized the town accountant as the authorized submitter and preparer. So please don't let me forget at the end of this discussion, since Biz is leaving soon, my recommendation for now is to vote to have you appoint the assistant town administrator, Jen Constable, as the authorized submitter preparer in the absence of the town accountant. Another point I wanted to make is the way that Plymouth County is administering this, they're requiring grant agreements to be in place between the county and each town. And the board has already authorized that grant agreement to be executed. So we haven't had to do it yet because we haven't put in a specific request yet, but we'll need to do that fairly soon. And then the last point on this slide I wanted to make is that in the federal, nothing in the federal law requires that we have an individual town meeting vote for use of any of these funds. And there's a state law, which I referenced on this slide, Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A, which also specifically authorizes these types of grants to be expended by towns without going back to town meeting. The Board of Selectmen can authorize the expenditure of grants just like we do and the schools do all the time. The county, however, has the right to impose additional requirements if they choose. And all the communities are going back and forth with the county right now because their latest guidance is that there are situations where the county will require us to hold a special town meeting and have a town meeting vote for accessing ARPA funds, again, in certain circumstances. For example, if we wanted to combine ARPA funds with another source of funding, like another grant, then in that instance, they'd want us to seek a special town meeting vote. So I and other town managers have pushed back against that because it's not required in the law. And I believe I included in your packet our town council's legal opinion that it's not required. But again, the county's position is that they have the right to impose additional requirements, and they may end up requiring that as well. So that's just a heads up for the board. So again, this is what the portal looks like. This is what it will look like for us, and generally how to apply for accessing our funds through the county. So again, we have 3.388 million from the county that's allocated to us. And I think it's generally, if I recall, generally allocated proportionally based on population. We've been doing a lot of work, working with Biz and Jen and other department heads and looking at the categories of funding and trying to do some preliminary planning. And what's become clear to us is there's really 2 urgent matters that I will seek tonight to get a consensus from you all to support an application. And I've mentioned these generally before, but here's a little bit more detail. The first is on the water side for the Abington-Rockland Joint Water Works. We all know that there's an issue with PFAS in the water, and the Department of Environmental Protection is requiring that the Joint Water Works take certain actions, put certain things in place, treatments to lower the amount of PFAS in the water. And it's urgent, it has to get done right away, and they don't have the funding to do it. So in talking to Joe LaPointe, the superintendent of the Joint Water Works, and also in consultation with Abington, we're recommending that we pursue an ARPA application for $500,000 to help with this first phase of this remediation. Abington will match it with the same amount. So we think that's critical. Similarly, coincidentally, a similar number, $515,000 on the sewer side. They have the digester boiler, which we've all become more versed in some of the sewer things than we were in prior years because these issues have been coming up more. But we learned from both the prior two superintendents as well as our interim superintendent that there's an urgent need to repair the existing digester boiler at the plant, and that's really needed to keep the plant going, and they just simply don't have the funds to be able to do it. Both of these things will have to be approved by Plymouth County, and it's not just a simple thing like showing them a PowerPoint slide and them saying yes. They're very, very stringent. There's a lot of detailed backup that has to be submitted, reviewed by them. They have their own private accounting firm and their own legal firm that reviews things. But it's, in my personal opinion, I think it's a clear-cut thing that should absolutely be approved by the county for ARPA. So we would recommend applying for these two things now. And I put this new bullet on the bottom that we've been working off of these interim rules for a while now. The federal treasury just came out with their final rule. And when you add in all the guidance that's associated with the final rule, it's literally 437 pages long. So there are some changes. Many of the changes are for the better. They're giving us, in some instances, a little bit more flexibility. For example, when Biz calculated our revenue loss previously last spring, she had to use this very complicated formula from the feds. They're now giving a new option that would allow communities essentially to have like a standard deduction, like on your taxes. Instead of itemizing your taxes, you can take a standard deduction. There's now an option for a similar type of standard amount that communities could claim for revenue loss. So we'll look at these things going forward, but the general categories of uses remain unchanged. So in addition to those two items, which I would like to discuss with you tonight, the last slide I want to show is just what our future considerations are on the use of these funds. I've been attending a number of different webinars and Zoom meetings, both statewide as well as nationally on ARPA, because every community throughout the country is having the same discussions and thinking about this. So there's been a lot of really good conversations happening. And the two takeaways that I've learned from these are, reinforcing that these are limited one-time funds and that communities should really be careful to not use these funds to just plug it in and balance your operating budget, because once the limited funds go away, you have a structural deficit that's even harder to handle. So be careful in use of the one-time funds, and then to really think big, and the word that they used a lot recently is to be impactful with the use of the funds. So here's just a collection of things that I think we should collectively consider. And I should highlight that I did meet Biz and Jen, and I met with the school department today. We went over the same presentation and talked with them about any potential school-related COVID ARPA needs that they might possibly have. So I wanted to make sure to highlight that. But obviously things like direct COVID-related costs, whether it's testing sites, vaccination sites, or PPE, that's obviously appropriate. Continued revenue loss, or continued water and sewer needs, that's of course appropriate to consider. But then there's a lot of other things, and this gets to some of the impactful concepts, which are public health programs, small business assistance, nonprofit assistance, aid to impacted industries, assistance to disproportionately impacted households, downtown recovery, and park improvements. These are all examples of things that communities all across the country are looking at and that we're encouraged to consider. So this is big, and we'll need to take our time in assessing these things. But I just thought it'd be helpful to get a sense of what we've done so far, which is revenue replacement with the first half of our direct funding. And the two things that we're looking at is emergent water and sewer infrastructure improvements, and then lastly, these are the things that we're looking at going forward. And so with that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, anybody have any questions or comments in regards to the ARPA funding? Okay, so I mean, again, are all the counties doing this, Doug, or is this just Plymouth County?
No, it's it might. I know Plymouth County is obviously there. There might be another county, another functioning county that's doing it. I believe in Barnstable County, it's sort of interesting. They're not they're not sharing the county funds with the communities. The county's gonna decide what they're gonna do with the funds, and they're seeking input. So I'll give it to Plymouth County. At least they came out with a formula and they came out with an allocation, and each town has, their share less the administrative expenses that the county is going to incur to administer this. But the county is, making all this funding available to the town, because my understanding again in Plymouth County, and again, Plymouth County does function a little more than, Barnstable County does function a little more than Plymouth County. They have many more departments, actual county departments. And Biz just sent me a note as well that I think she said Norfolk and Bristol are following the same process. So I assume that, Biz, you mean Norfolk and Bristol are doing the same thing as Plymouth County? Is that right? They're all teamed up together?
Yes, they have the same portals going.
Okay,
So they're following the same logic, et cetera.
that's good. But again, when I talked to my colleagues on the Cape, it was shocking to me to see that that the Barnstable County wasn't just essentially going to pass through some kind of review process, all the funding to each town. They're keeping a lot of it for their own ARPA eligible projects. So and I should say too, I'm critical of the county and how they're handling this potential town meeting issue, but the county has also done a really good job in many other respects. They did a very good job in helping us with administering the CARES Act funding. And there is a lot of oversight and auditing and review and reporting back to the feds that has to happen with this. And they're taking all of that on. So they are adding value, but there is that one thing on the town meetings that I still personally have a difference of opinion about.
Yeah, that's troubling. That just feels like an unnecessary layer of government oversight that similar to what we were talking about earlier, just everybody has to have their say. And it's unnecessary just to, I think, grasp at relevance, but it is what it is. And I guess we'll play by the rules. So everything on that list, those are the only things that you can use these funds for, those 6 criteria that were listed and things that fall into that.
Right. So again, there's the 4 general ones, which the county kind of further split up into those 6. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on.
Before you go on, the
vote.
Yeah, well, and I don't need a vote. A consensus is fine. I just want to make sure that I'm transparent and that there's no misunderstandings. So I just want to make sure the board is comfortable with us submitting those 2 projects for water and sewer, given the urgent nature of those needs.
No, I think that's with the urgent nature of both and the impact that it has to our community. I think that's a great choice to target first.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it too. And then we actually also have to do I was just going to get to that, Biz, but she just sent it out. The formal vote removing Biz and adding Jen as a submitter. So I'll entertain a motion to add Jen to that position.
So moved.
I'll make that motion. Okay. I'll second it.
I got a motion and a second. All those in favor, Selectman Ryan,
Yes.
Selectman Needham,
Yes.
Selectman Penny,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Nyman,
Yes.
and myself. Okay, so yeah, I think general consensus, looking at everybody, I think everybody's in agreement that you can definitely submit those 2 projects for that funding. Biz, you got your finger up?
Yes, sir. Could I just ask you to amend that vote? The vote needs to state that I will be removed effective such and such a date, and Jen will be added such and such a date to the opera, because otherwise they can't put her on if I am not formally removed with the date.
That's a good point, Biz. So would it make sense, Biz, to have Jen be effective February 14th, which is the following Monday? Would that make the most sense?
I think that makes perfect sense, seeing I'm not going to be here.
Okay, so
I think
you're gonna
that's a good idea.
amend that motion to be effective February 14th,
Okay.
2020.
motion.
I'll amend my motion.
Come on, Biz, look what you did.
I just want to make sure you're covered.
Yeah, I
No,
got you.
that's all.
That's that technical expertise I was talking about.
There we go.
All right, so Larry's amended the motion to reflect Biz being
Second.
taken off officially February 11th and Jen as of February 14th. I got a second. All those in favor, you just put your hands up and I'll go from there. And that's unanimous. Thank you, guys. Okay, next on the agenda. Anything else? We good?
But let me ask you this, it's kind of related to this, and we could also do it under the budget, but Biz, did you want to just maybe give any kind of update on CARES Act, or is that sort of redundant at this point? You're on-
I don't think it's redundant. If the board will allow me to, I would like to update the board where we are on the CARES Act. Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen. If I can see what my screen says. Okay. Let's see. Back down here. Let's see. Okay. The CARES Act, as you know, started in March of 2020. So what I have here is I have a reconciliation of all of our submissions that were sent to Plymouth County. And on those submissions, way up there. Sorry, not working out too well on this. If I minimize our heads, I can get the rest up there. There we go. So this is every single submission that we did. The adjustments that were made, town adjustments, school adjustments, and what our final payments were, check dates, and what we received to date. So essentially, we have been paid for 51 out of our 56 submissions so far. We have applied for 3,395,963, which is here. Our original allocation was for 3,306,000. And so we are anticipating, with any luck, that the Plymouth County CARES will approve our overage of $289,000, so that we'll be fully covered to the requested amount of 3,395,000. Out of the submissions that we have made and have made, we have 22% were submitted on behalf of the town at 735,000. 78% were on behalf of the school department, which is $2,665,000. So we're expecting little bits of money coming in over the next couple of weeks. And they plan to have all checks out in relation to CARES Act by March 31st. So this in itself is a significant amount of money for the community, and the amount of work that went into the town providing the information, the school providing the information to the town providing all the information to Plymouth County was a fairly daunting process. But at this point, I feel confident that other than maybe 40,000, everything but that will be covered out of a $3.3 million process. So I think we've done pretty good on this. I just want you all to know how much was spent and how much was spent by both entities and what we have remaining to collect.
Mike, if I can just say one thing, I want to correct one thing Biz said. We didn't do pretty good. I think we did awesome. Like she's being a little bit humble here, but if you look at what other communities did, we did extremely well. And that was really a combination of the fact that Biz took the time to really work very closely with the county, make sure that things were, pre-approved, all our ducks in a row. She was very aggressive about putting in, as much as we can. And again, we're hoping to get excess covered from other communities that are leaving money on the table. So I think we did an outstanding job. And I would also just add that this was something that I and other town managers were a little concerned about initially, about the county's ability to manage this because they hadn't done something like this before. But in the end, I think they did a really good job with it. And again, they're responsible for all the reporting and all the interfacing with the federal treasury. So this worked out very well for the town and the school and the community as a whole. And I want to thank Biz for her efforts on that.
And as far as Plymouth County is concerned, comparative wise, those who didn't go through the county, they were eligible to receive probably 40% of this. They did not receive nearly as much because they had gone through the state level. So a lot of hard work on all sides, and everybody did a good job, and those checks should be here by the end of March.
Perfect. Thank you, Biz.
You're welcome.
Anybody have any questions on CARES Act? Okay. Next on the agenda, FY23 budget. Doug?
Thanks, Mike. Just going to give a couple of updates and then I'll turn it over to Biz to see if she wants to fill in anything further. The first big thing, and she can answer questions about it if you'd like, because she did the work for it, but our certified free cash came in at $4.5 million, which is excellent. You know, it's higher than it's traditionally been in the past. Biz can talk more about it. There's a variety of reasons for why it was a little bit larger this year. A lot of it was due to the fact that during our revenue crisis, we really were extremely aggressive in controlling our spending. We froze our spending, you know, we furloughed employees. We took all the tough actions that we had to do. And then additionally, we were able to access CARES Act and, you know, get reimbursed for unemployment and other things like that. So there's a lot of variables that go into free cash. It's a very complicated formula. But in the end, that's really going to help us at town meeting because we have a lot of significant one-time needs that I've highlighted in the past, whether it's a new fire engine, a new ambulance, a whole new fuel management system at the highway department. And so this is really going to be put to good use, not to mention the first things right off the top, like repaying stabilization, repaying OPEB, et cetera, from what we were forced to take out in the past. So certified free cash came in at 4.5 million. That's really good news. The governor's budget just came out. So we got those preliminary cherry sheet numbers. So Biz calculated the 70-30 split, the revenue sharing agreement that we have with the schools. And we met with Dr. Cron and Jane Hackett earlier today to go over the numbers. So we are all on the same page with the school department. They are comfortable with the numbers that we showed them. I still have a bunch of work to do to make some significant cuts into the requests that all of our department heads put in for their FY23 budgets. So I do have some cuts to make, and my goal is to present a detailed line item balanced budget to the board at our next meeting on the 15th. So that's kind of my just high-level overview tonight. I don't know, Biz, is there more that you think is appropriate to share at this point in time?
If the board would like more detail on how the free cash certification came about, I'd be more than happy to share that information because I know there was a lot of scuttlebutt. So I'd rather put some of those questions to rest if that's appropriate.
Yeah, Biz, I think it's appropriate. I was going to ask the question, you know, because obviously, you know, some of us have been finance committee members in the past, and I don't ever recall 4.5 million being something that came back to us. And obviously that there was some stuff that went into that, you know, along with our, you know, conservative projections, but there was also some other things that came through that, you know, benefited that, you know, we weren't able to foresee. So by all means, Biz, take it away.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen if I can find the right one. Let's see. Yeah, okay. All right. I just gotta make sure I have the right screenshot up for all of you, which I probably just lost it. Oh, sorry, 1 second. You know, you try real hard to get all these screens up and then they disappear on you. Let's see. Okay, that's what I want. Okay. Sorry. I'll figure it out when we get here. Okay. Can you all see this screen?
We're looking at the list of your files in like Windows Explorer right now.
Well, you don't need those. Okay. Okay, here we go. You should see.
Yeah, we got it now.
Okay, I'll just go up to the top. As explained to the school department earlier today, I know there were questions as to, oh my gosh, how'd you do that? And, you know, nothing's made up, everything's real. So you start here at the top, which is the undesignated fund balance. And that is our balance outstanding as of June 30, 2020. You have to start at the prior fiscal year end, or the beginning of the fiscal year. And this is prior year encumbrances, expenditures, continuing appropriations, petty cash, debt payments, and special articles. So what does this mean? These encumbrances are bills that we held back, we saved money for so that we could pay in fiscal 21 for bills that we owed in 20. Reserve for expenditures are monies that we designated from free cash to pay for bills during 20. Petty cash, that's just standard, that stays there. Reserve for debt payments, that's an amortization schedule that we have every year that we can use to pay down partial debt payments based on the amortization schedule. And this is reserved for special articles. So all of this amount right here comes to $2,830,000. So we closed that. We turned that back into our unreserved fund balance, which now gives us 6,333 is our unreserved fund balance or undesignated fund balance. And these are the technical terms for this type of accounting, but it's the only way for me to explain it. So here we start again at the 6,333. And again, our encumbrances last year were a lot higher than they were this year, or closing 2021 into 22. Reserve for expenditures, again, used to free cash. Continuing appropriations of articles that were already out there. We had a fund balance reserve for abatements that we could, we had to hold back on as an overlay. And again, the debt payments. And coincidentally, this came to $2,832,000. So between last year and this year, it was a $2,000 variance. And here, this is where the biggest impact comes into play. This is based on the revenues. So we had, in essence, these figures right here, which come to $67,399,535. Those were our revenues that we collected during fiscal year 21. Now, audit adjustment here, that's an internal audit adjustment that has to do with what's called deferred revenue. That deferred revenue boosted up our free cash certification by $180,000, or undesignated by $180,000, and that's due to an accounts receivable issue in the background. So then here we spent $64,908,000. So that gives us our new unreserved balance going to fiscal year 21, ending out 21 at $5,992,000. So all this information is reviewed and approved by the Department of Revenue. We provide them the information, they review everything we give them. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is what's called a balance sheet checklist. A balance sheet checklist is a secondary proof to how we got to our figures. I'm going to explain it, and you're probably all glassy-eyed by now, but when you get to it, if you have a question, I'll answer it as best I can. So our estimated local receipts were $7.7 million. We actually collected $9.2 million. So that gave us a increase over revenues of $1.518 million. How did we get there? There's certain revenues that you can't budget for, which is foreclosures, etc. So foreclosures, penalties on liens, etc. That came in up at $717,000. So we can't budget for those because we already have that in our accounts receivable calculations. So secondary to this is we also had $530,000 of marijuana money or cannabis revenue. $530,000 came in through taxation. So those two alone are $1.3 million. The 700,000 is a strictly variable that potentially will never happen again. So that's a one-time revenue, as if how you want to look at it. The marijuana money or cannabis, we know will be reoccurring via taxation. This is the 180,000 here that you saw on the previous page that I said was closed out of deferred revenue. Next is our estimated cherry sheet revenue was 18,047,000. We actually collected 17,477,000. So the variance from what we estimated to what we actually received is we received $569,000 less of cherry sheet revenue. It's not unusual, just like our own revenues on the town side, it's estimates. Okay, so it's not unusual for you to get less money. This is just a little bit higher than normal. Then, so if you take all these numbers and just add them together, it gives you like a revenue number. One of the biggest things here is we had $1.268 million in other revenues, which are included in our final figure. We took from our savings accounts, our stabilization funds, $500,000. We took from our overlay surplus this year, $200,000 from our OPEB trust, $250,000. That right there in itself is another 1.268 million in revenue. So you add those up, that defines how you had an excess revenue. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So then what we did, although we took money out of our stabilization and our OPEB, we also took money and put them back in. So we had $155,000 that we put back into those stabilization funds. I think the most important part here is the unencumbered, unexpended funds. And that comes from articles that we closed out that we didn't use. It comes from departmental closeouts. And again, we took a very conservative approach with all of our departments to not spend the total of their monies because we weren't sure what was going to happen in the closeout. Now, on the town side, the town returned $2,230,000. The school returned $14,209 or $14,069. So that those are how we come up with the figures that we got to. And then here, this is our votes of free cash. Last year we were certified 21147, which has been in line with what had been happening in the past with Rockland. That's how much we spent, 1162. And we did not spend 259,383. So that 259,383 goes back into the next year's calculation of the free cash. Okay. So yeah. And then we had 100,000 that returned back from the prior year's overlay. It's just a closing out entry. That's 100,000. So that's essentially how we got to our pure or undesignated fund proof of 5992 here. And then we go over to the free cash certification. You start out at the top with the 5992. Now, part of the rules for certifying free cash, you have to subtract out your real estate and personal property taxes being non-collectible, your accounts receivable at the time, you haven't collected it yet. And then you have to also take out deficit spending. So deficit spending, there was a variance with the treasurer on the receivables for 14,000 against 1,700. The special revenue career pathways, that's a deficit in one of the school department revenues that will have to be addressed. Recommendation, I'll go over that with Doug tomorrow. Chapter 90, that's a delay in filing for your Chapter 90 reimbursements. You have until September 30 to file for your reimbursements, and we have to prove those reimbursements to the Department of Revenue. If we have not filed for those reimbursements on or before September 30, they become a deficit. So that's a deficit there. We're working with the Highway Department to file the Chapter 90 request for reimbursement in a more timely fashion. Puerto Rico hurricane. This was a special revenue that goes back to, I believe, 2019 when the hurricanes hit in Puerto Rico several years ago. There was the school department got a grant for 10,000 and change. When that Puerto Rico hurricane money came in for that grant, at that time, it was put into their budget. Where it didn't belong into their budget, it should have gone to the grant to offset the costs expended within the grant. So this is something that will have to be satisfied. Again, I'll be talking to Doug as far as getting this cleared up via free cash. Any deficits that carry year to year to year, they're always going to be there until you satisfy them one way or another. Okay. And in this case, for that and this, the easiest way to satisfy those is going to be through a free cash transfer, in my opinion. Traffic enforcement, that's $3. We could throw that in there, but I'm sure that's something that I can just get the chief to make an adjustment there. The insurances, et cetera, these are withholdings. This is standard due to timing issues. When you have your final payroll of the fiscal year being paid and your liabilities being paid, it ends up being a timing issue. So our free cash got reduced by the 352, the 60 at the top, the 64,000, the 1,177,000, and the 352. And then also out of this, it's a calculation based where it says deferred revenue. That's based on your accounts receivable for your real estate, accounts receivable, personal property, and your allowance for abatement and exemptions, and the deferred revenue for all three of those. So once you subtract everything out, that gives you certified free cash of 4,565,826. Now, if anything was wrong here, it wouldn't have gotten certified. The DOR, you worked very specifically with the DOR. I can't just say, well, this is what I think it is. I have to provide balance sheets. I have to provide all kinds of accounts receivable, any monies that were received on or before September 30. I have to provide that information. There's a lot of detail that goes in behind this in order to get it certified. So this is where the free cash came from. A lot of revenues that weren't anticipated for sale of foreclosed property. The marijuana, which was a new revenue, and a lot of the money came from us transferring funds from our savings accounts. Okay, so that's essentially where it came from. Are there any questions on this?
Anybody have any questions? Everybody got that first pass?
I know it's a lot of information. I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, it's the riveting world of municipal finance. So no, I mean, made sense. I mean, it's been certified. So I mean, I just appreciate you going through it and addressing some of the questions. I mean, we've talked about it all the time about being transparent, and when you get a giant number like that, you want to be able to break it down and let people know exactly what goes into it, just so that there's no question as to where it came from.
It was a great explanation.
That's just, there's no malfeasance, there was no stealing, there was no, you wanted to budget me so you can make this look better. And that's not the way it works. We aren't allowed to do that. The law doesn't allow us to do that. The DOR doesn't allow us to do that. So, in part, thank you to all the departments for all the hard work working with us in order to keep us at a level situation. As far as the town's concerned, you saw in the monies that we are receiving back from the CARES Act, we were able to move a lot of salary items to the CARES Act, but we didn't continue to spend that money in our budgets. So that right there is a big turn back. Okay. One of the other larger turnbacks, we'll just get it out on the table, was the health insurance. Because at the time that you do your projections, you don't know where you're going with health insurance. At that time, the school was projecting to add on, I don't know, for the remote learning, I think it was like 15, 20 people that we had to estimate health insurance for. So if those people needed health insurance, we could provide it. So that was also another large turn back on the town side from the budgeting aspect. And this was all explained to the school department earlier today.
And they were satisfied with the explanation?
Yes, there were.
Very good. Very good. Anybody else have any questions, comments for Biz?
Thank you, Biz.
You're welcome. This won't happen again. Just be aware, this will not happen again. Okay? COVID's been torture. All right? And
So,
torture in many ways, this way is kind of a good way. So just be
so when the
prepared.
when the next accountant comes in and doesn't get 4.5 million in free cash, we can't say, wow, we really
Don't
missed
beat
this.
them up.
All right. All right. That won't
Yeah,
go on the review.
if you get the average of 2 million, you should be very happy.
Absolutely. That was always
Okay.
kind of what we
And
thought.
Biz, at the end of the day, the one-time funds that we've got through this and,
Mhm.
some of the other things, doing some quick math in my head, we probably would have been right around the $2 million range.
Yes, you would have.
In that ballpark. Yep.
Exactly. But jumping through hoops, mainly the funding the budgets through 750,000 through the trust funds and everything we needed to do to make it work, to make sure we stayed stable and could fund the budgets at that time. Because if we didn't do that, the unknowns, we would have had to cut an awful lot more.
Perfect. Thank you, Biz. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Okay, next on the agenda, other old business not reasonably anticipated. Doug.
I have none.
Okay. Number 6, town administrators report and correspondence. Doug.
Thanks, Mike. So just a few things. This one, I suppose we could have mentioned under the budget discussion, which is just that we are now in deficit spending for snow and ice, and that's allowed under Mass General Law, and the Municipal Modernization Act allows the town administrator to authorize that. So obviously with this last big storm, this set us back even more, and we will be adjusting for that at the special town meeting in May. Related to the storm, I might as well jump ahead to that one. I just cannot say enough good things about our highway department, and I know the Parks Department also assists with plowing as well. So really highway and parks, they just do an incredible job. And I know we say it often, but I think with this storm in particular, I want to take a few minutes really just to thank Dave Taylor, for his leadership and leading the department, but he's also out there in a loader clearing out Union Street, as well, because of the staffing issues we have. And literally every single person in the highway department and the private contractors that they secure, they literally are the best. And I don't say that lightly. And I know that you all live in town and you see the quality of the plowing that happens here. So I want to thank all of them for just an outstanding job. Next, what just made me think of it, I just added this to my list when Biz was going over free cash. She was talking about the marijuana revenues. I had mentioned earlier that the marijuana dispensary that the board had previously signed a host community agreement with, and they had already received all their permits from the Zoning Board of Appeals for 1015 Hingham Street. The name of that company was Cresco. They have pulled out. I mentioned that several meetings ago. Well, I'm pleased to say that a new company has secured a lease for that site and is going to be pursuing a marijuana dispensary at the same location. Anybody that's been calling me, I've been steering them back to that location since it's already been approved. So we've already been negotiating the host community agreement with them using the same standard template that we've used with everyone else. So we are on track, assuming that the agenda works with Mike, to have them in at your next board meeting on the 15th to potentially approve the host community agreement for this new organization, but at that same location, 1015 Hingham Street. So that will be good. Then lastly, 2 COVID things. The first, I want to thank Plymouth County for this. We were talking earlier about CARES Act funding. At the very, very end of the process, right at the end of the calendar year, when the county had to make sure all of the funding was expended or they'd have to turn something back to the federal government, they made the decision to use the remaining funds that they had to purchase COVID-19 rapid tests, take-home tests for each of the communities. So Plymouth County has done that. You may have already seen an article in the paper about it. So I went up on last Friday, I went up with Dave Taylor in one of the trucks and we physically picked up 12,600 COVID-19 tests, and those come in, there's 2 tests per box, so it's 6,300 boxes. So we're very excited about that. That's has been given to the town. We have them stored at a undisclosed secure location. And I am working right now with Fire Chief Duffy to come up with a plan where what we would like to do is set up a drive-through system, potentially the weekend. Right now it's February 1st, so potentially we're looking at the weekend of February 12th to do a drive-through where they would be available to everyone in the community. And we'll probably have to limit the quantity, just given the number of people that live in town. But we're given full discretion on how to distribute these tests. So we're looking to distribute them to the whole community. I should also highlight that the Board of Health has recently secured a state grant, and they also purchased some COVID-19 tests. Not as many as we're able to secure, but they did secure a whole bunch. So I've spoken to the health agent. We're going to combine efforts. We're going to add their test kits to ours, so we can do it all in one drive-through, make it as efficient as possible, because we don't want to have huge lines going through town hall. So we're really excited about that, and I'm also pleased that Fire Chief Duffy is willing to help. And this is what fire chiefs do, as you guys know. They're all about logistics and planning, and he needs to drill these types of exercises anyways. He has a CERT team, so I'm very confident that between police and fire that we can sort that out. And then lastly, regarding COVID, I just wanted to highlight that in the heat of the Omicron surge, we were looking at a percent positivity rate statewide of like 27%, which was just terrible. And the latest data looks like it's really dropping very quickly, and we're down closer to the 7% positivity statewide the last time I looked. So I believe that the Board of Health has on their next agenda for their next meeting, which is, I think it's on the 22nd of this month, February 22nd. I think that they're going to be revisiting the mask mandate in town, building conference rooms. And I certainly don't want to get ahead of them or speak for them, but I think it's certainly possible that they could lift that mask mandate at their meeting on the 22nd. And again, I was only throwing that date out about the February 12th as a possible date for the COVID test kits. Certainly as I coordinate with the chief and we look at schedules and vacations and things like that, we'll see what makes the most sense. But I just wanted to tip the board and the public off that we'll be coming up with a plan very soon. And that's all.
So all I ask is with the distribution of these tests, we saw some confusion with the last time that there were tests that were made available. And I just want to make sure that information is given out, in a timely manner, that residents know a few days before that they're available, and then that we are checking IDs and that we're being consistent with how the stuff is given out, and that we ensure that it is in fact Rockland residents that are receiving these tests, because every community in Plymouth County got the test. And I just want to make sure that these ones are Rockland residents, and we can let the community know that this was done 100% on the up and up and the right way. So,
absolutely, 100%. And that's why, like I said, I'm pleased to have the assistance of the fire chief for that.
as am I. Very, very comforting to know that. So, okay. Thank you, Doug. Let's see. Where are we now? Just move my screen for a second. All right, on to Selectmen's comments. Comments, opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the Board of Selectmen and are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. Selectman Penny.
So only comment is hats off to Dave Taylor, Peter Yule, Park Department, the Highway Department. It's for such a small town. We have some pretty impressive department heads out there and employees within those departments. We routinely talk about the fire and the police and things that they do that help this community. But this is consistent. Since Dave has been running this highway department, there is not a town anywhere with roads in better condition. They do an amazing job. And they do it on, while we spend a decent amount, they do it very frugally to get this town, the streets cleaned, as safe as possible for the residents, that they can get out, get around. So I just want to say thank you to not only Dave and Pete, but everyone in their departments, and everyone else in the town that chips in and jumps in. So it's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Rich. Selectman Needham?
Just want to make sure I'm not muted. Okay.
You were actually not.
Yeah, here I am. And same. It's been so impressive, and time again, Dave Taylor and his department comes through for us. And this, we all needed it, and I just wanted to say thank you. It was incredible.
Thank you, Tiffany. Selectman Ryan?
I also thank Dave Taylor, but on a sad note, former Rockland select person Pauline Pigeon passed away, and she's the mother of Greg Pigeon, Rockland police officer, and her husband Roland, been very active in the town all these years too. And her wake will be at Sunday on 2/6 from 1 to 4 at Magoon Biggins. And on a similar sad note, Joe Weisgerber, former teacher and counselor, passed away just yesterday, or maybe, I think it was yesterday. And the man was a great, not only a good person for the schools, but he was also a tremendous woodworker, and he created some beautiful works of art that you would have to see to believe. And there's no, I haven't heard any arrangements for him yet, but he was a good man, a good buddy, and he was always fun to sit and talk to him. So other than that, on we go.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah, you're right. They're both great people, and I'll tell you, I mean, the woodwork that Joe Weisgerber could do was unbelievable stuff. He used to teach the woodworking class for adults at the high school at night and stuff like that as well. He was unbelievably talented person. So
I have one more favor to ask the board, and that would be to make Friday, February 4th, 2022, Mary Ryan Day for the town of Rockland. She's retiring after 27 years, and she's put in a lot of time and effort to help this town. And be honest with you, if it wasn't for her having that job, I wouldn't be sitting here. And, Rockland's history could be a lot different. Not that I did anything great, but just the way things work out in life. So anyway, you're all invited to come to the fire station from 11 to 3.
So I will entertain a motion to symbolically make February 4th, Larry?
Yes, 2020.
2020, yeah, I got the year. Next, 2022, officially Mary Ryan Day in the town of Rockland. So I will entertain a motion for that.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
I got a motion and a second, and all those in favor, you can just raise your hands. That's unanimous, Larry.
I'm going to abstain because it's a conflict of interest.
Of course. Why would you want to? Well, yeah, I mean, obviously now, her retiring from the fire department, is going to pale in comparison as far as being easy compared to what she's got to deal with now on a day-to-day basis. So she deserves a day. It might be her the last one she enjoys for a while.
No, we get that. Things are well planned in advance, I'll tell you.
I'm sure you guys are.
Look forward to these days.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you all very much.
Vice Chairman Nyman.
I'll just reiterate what my colleagues had mentioned and thank everyone who was involved with snow removal this weekend. The roads in Rockland were really top notch. Traveling through the different neighboring towns, our roads were the best for sure. So thank you to everyone involved. And also I want to extend my congratulations to Mary on her well-deserved retirement. Thank you for your 27 years of service to the town of Rockland. We'll miss you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Nyman. Yeah, I mean, everybody else has kind of said it. I just want to kind of put it out there that I just want to make sure that as residents and board members, that we don't take the highway department for granted. They are a special group and they do a phenomenal job. And yeah, sometimes there are hiccups along the way, and sometimes not every street is hit, at the time that, the resident wants to see the street hit, and I had a lot of conversations with residents this weekend and try to remind them that this was a storm of epic proportions, in comparison to some of the other storms. And there weren't a lot of places for them to put the snow. I mean, they had to close Union Street last night to do snow removal. And I'm sure there's areas of the town that they've still got to get, hit, and their sidewalks that still need to be cleared. But we have got a top-notch department. We've got a top-notch department head. And, the best thing about them is that they're always available to take residents, questions and concerns and phone calls. And I just wish I saw that more, that residents would call and reach out to them, as opposed to, taking shots on social media. They're always there to address it. And that goes for our team at Town Hall as well. I mean, you see a lot of stuff on social media and you automatically believe that it's the gospel. But, in the time that Doug and his team have been here, there's really only been a handful of residents that have really reached out with questions, that aren't just, complaints. And I think there's a lot of great information that him and his team possess. There's a lot of, information and knowledge that this board possesses. I've recently been meeting with some residents, on a one-on-one basis, and I'm always available to do so. And, most of the few residents I've met with recently, I think there's been 3 of them. Each one of them I've met for 2.5 hours, and, we're open books. We'll tell you what's going on. And, we may not always have the answers right away, but we'll take it back and we'll try to find a solution for you. And if we can't find it, we'll put you in touch with the people that can. And I just, I guess the message that I'm just trying to get to is just, give us a chance. Give us a chance, give the department heads a chance to do their job. And if you have difficulty, finding a solution there, then reach out to Doug at Town Hall, and he'll definitely find an answer for you. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session per Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, contract negotiations with non-union personnel, police chief, and per Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to consider the purchase of real property, assessors parcel 52-63-0, and review and approval of executive session minutes for 12/21/21, 12/28/21, 1/4/22, 1/10/22, and 1/18/22, not to reconvene.
So moved.
I've got a motion. I have a second. All those in favor, Selectman Ryan,
Yes.
Selectman Needham,
Yes.
Selectman Nyman,
Yes.
Selectman Penny,
Yes.
and myself. Biz, thank you very much. This is the last Selectmen's meeting that you'll be in this official capacity, and we wish you well in the town of, I'll just say it, I think people know the town of Holbrook. They're lucky to have you. We'll miss you, and thank you for all your hard work for the town.
Thank you and good luck, and I wish you the best as well.
Thank you much.